You're listening to the Beat Motel Zine podcast, and we need to warn you that we use words like shit, bollocks, scraptics, fuck, anarcho-syndicalist, and cunt, and we don't normally beep those words out, apart from the word cunt, because we're not total animals. Now, we know as well as you that your children can hear these words on any street in Britain, possibly any street anywhere in the world, but we also appreciate that you may not want to invite these words into your home if you have children or sensitive pets nearby whilst listening to this podcast. So listener discretion is advised. That being said, if your children aren't allergic to hearing words like fuck, shit, buttocks or hind penis, they might learn something from listening to this podcast, although probably not, because the quality of our educational content is quite poor. So there you go, fuckers, buckle in and let's get started. Hey, you're back with Beat Motel, and I'm your host, Andrew Culture. Sam isn't here today. I think he's in Italy, falling off a bicycle or something. So, not instead of Sam, and not as a replacement for Dr. Sam, I have Marv here. Now, I know you as Marv, but does everyone call you Marv?
Yes.
Yes.
It's not my real name, and I'm quite happy that nobody knows my real name, and those that do don't use it anyway. So
I think it's quite... well, I'm Andrew Culture just because in Ipswich, that's what everyone called me. You just sort of took your surname from whatever band you're in. So I know you as Marv Gadgie, and Gadgie isn't a band. What is it?
it's a fanzine.
Hey.
It's a long-running fanzine that you know well what it is. It's 25 years, 26 years now. It's been going. Issue 50 has just been released into the wild. So it's a long-running UK punk rock fanzine.
I absolutely know what Gadgie zine is. I'm trying to think how I even discovered it. Whose fault was it?
Oh, that's a good question. I remember you ordering loads of copies years ago and selling them in a distro or a shop in Ipswich, and you just kept coming back for more. And I've sold them all. Can I have some more? And then you invited me on to write for your fanzine, I believe. Along with Scanner, who lived in the same street as you. I think the addresses were very similar, weren't they?
He was very close. There was there was 3 zines in Ipswich, like regular ones at the time. There was mine, Beat Motel, where this comes from. There was Scanner, done by Steve, who has lived in New Zealand for years now. Do occasionally kind of hear from him, and he's still running it as a web zine. And then there was Real Overdose.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Yeah, done by Wolfie. Yeah, that's right, who no one has seen for many years. He sort of picked a date that he was going to duck out of the punk scene and did, much to everyone's surprise, and no one's really heard from him since.
Wow.
But yeah, you're alluding to, I had a record shop that I ran with Ricky from Red Flag, and every poor bugger who came into that shop, I'd try and get him to leave with a copy of a fanzine.
Thank you.
Which, well, just... I'm not blowing my own organ or whatever the phrase is, but there were kids that came into that shop who I'm still friends with now, and they're making their own fanzines and doing all that stuff. And I think you only need it to be you only need a fanzine shoved in your face once or twice, and then it's quite an easy thing to figure out where the joy is. And it's certainly an accessible looking thing. And I'm not saying that, I'm not being mean about the appearance of Gadgie, which I, of course, adore. But it's not like picking up a copy of Smash Hits or something and going, well, I'm never going to be the editor for a team of journalists.
Oh yeah. The presentation often gets commented on. It is deliberately, I was going to say lo-fi, but it is done on a computer. It's not cut and paste anymore. But no, I've no interest in making it look any better. I just always figured there's more room for writing then.
Oh, absolutely.
If I put more pictures in and mess around with the format and make it look better, I can't stand it when you get a fanzine and there's like a little bit of text, a picture, and a blank space, or some arty geometric shapes in the top corner. Do you know what I mean? Or you get a fanzine, you read it in like 6 minutes, and no, I just like to fill it with text.
I'm still a bit salty about the way fanzines went. Probably about 10 or 12 years ago, possibly a bit longer ago. I was going out to zine symposiums at Brighton and London, all kinds of places. And the last one I went to in Brighton, I published a copy of Beat Motel, which I used to pride myself at having like a minimum of 80,000 words in each issue. You were a columnist at some time. There
Yeah,
was
yeah.
probably like 20 columnists.
It was packed with as much information as you could. I think those Ipswich fanzines had you all. I won't say all were the same, but they had a look that as if you were all from the same fanzine stable. That
Well,
they were very similar.
all going to the same gigs together and
Yeah,
all
yeah,
helping out with each other's fanzines. Very much, even on a technical level,
yeah.
somehow I ended up being the one who understood how to use the fancy software. And then, so I'd love the idea actually now if there was like an Ipswich punk fanzine support line that was me. And they didn't ring me, they'd just talk over a pint at a gig. So like most of the instructions for how to use the software was probably shouted really loudly in each other's ears in ways that we couldn't actually understand.
Whilst watching a band,
Whilst
talking
watching the
about
band.
leaving 0.5 mm at the side and things like that.
Oh god, yeah, like trying to figure out what bleeds were and stuff like
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
just wild. But where'd you get Gadgie printed?
Footprint in Leeds.
Oh, still with Footprint. Excellent.
Yeah, yeah. They're Workers Cooperative, Footprint Workers Cooperative in Leeds. There's a quick advert for them. Yeah, they have the right ethics. They're part of the way we do things, aren't they? They're sort of DIY punks. I don't think they're necessarily punks as such, but they do things the same way the DIY scene does. So I like to support that sort of thing.
Footprint are just brilliant, and I found them really, really useful when I started up because I had to go at printing the fanzine myself. I'd like literally with a printer at home. I got about 3 issues in, and Beat Motel was about 80 pages. I was like, this is going to bankrupt me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I spoke to them, and what was nice is that I deal with printers a little bit in my day job, and they're complex beasts. They'd like give you these really technical specifications where foot printers would just email you back and go, well, you fucked that up, didn't you?
Yeah,
just
yeah. I just want someone to say to me, right, 100 copies will cost this.
Yeah.
Give us your address, pay for it, and we'll send you it. That's all I want. I'm not interested in technical things, as you've probably gathered from the layout and what I've said already.
But the thing is, if you're not technical, the sort of layout you use keeps it readable. Because if you try and cram too much in, then when it goes through the print presses, it just comes out kind of smudgy and
yeah,
and weird looking. Did they ever send you they never sent specs, but they used to send a thing when you first spoke to them, and it said, look, we appreciate your punk rock and you want black everything, but if you're putting a photograph of a band wearing black in front of their black amps on a black backdrop, it's probably not going to come out very well
in the dark. Yeah,
in the dark. Yeah, no. So I thought
yeah.
this is the kind of guidance the zine scene needs.
Yeah, I learned that very quickly, and I started just cutting pictures up from magazines that might be black and white already, photocopying pages from like fighting fantasy books and things like that, because everything was just black and white line drawings. And yeah, I would deliberately leave out things that I thought that's a brilliant photo, but I wouldn't put it in. But if you look at somebody like Suspect Device fanzine, I don't know how Tony does it or where he gets that printed, but the photographs take up whole pages and they're fantastic. They're really clear and crisp. But no, I'm not that sort of fanzine. I admire fanzines that can do that, though.
It's a lot of work, basically. I could do it with Beat Motel, but it's a lot of fiddling around, basically. Have you ever actually met the guys from Footprinters?
No, I don't believe I have. Not in. I may have met them and not known who they were, but whenever I send emails back and forth, there's like half a dozen different names come back on the emails. So no, I've never. I don't believe I've actually met any of them.
I met them at a London zine symposium. There was a zine, and I wish I could remember the name of it, but it was run by a guy called Ed, and possibly his girlfriend at the time. He also was a cartoonist who drew monkeys. God, it's
I like the sound of that zine.
Reason to Believe or something. Oh, no, it wasn't Reason to Believe. That was a different zine, but they put on a zine symposium in a squat in London, and it was like I don't know if it was a basketball court or something some of the time, because I'm not going to describe the whole fucking building, but yeah, the footprint guys were there, and they brought some of their printing equipment down from Leeds, and they made a zine on the day and printed it, and they had all the choppers,
Yeah,
technical term there, the
guillotines
choppy
and
things,
yeah.
that guillotine, that's
Wow.
it, and collators and whatever. And I can remember a little part of me was disappointed at how smart their gear looked. Now, this sounds like an odd thing to say, but in my head, like in the Cold War, the Americans and the British like airdropped print presses into West Germany or East Germany, whichever one the communist one was. So to encourage people to like print subversive literature and underline the Soviets. I really liked the idea of them using print presses like that, or ones that look like. Do you remember the Bertha, the kids' TV program?
Yes,
Bertha was like
Bertha, lovely Bertha.
Yeah, I kind of hoped their print presses would look like that. Oh, sorry, look, I know this isn't a podcast, but my studio's falling apart. That just landed on me. So I kind of talked that into a dead end, really. But I did manage to.
That's fine. References to 80s children's TV programs will always be fine with me.
Well, see that's if I was a smarter presenter or host, I could try and pretend that was what I was trying to do. So going back to talking about Gadgie, obviously it's very much a punk rock zine. There's no doubt about that. But one of the things I've always really, really liked about it is it's not so much a nod to your childhood as a welcoming gesture.
Yeah.
Like a showman might do, pointing at something. Come and join me, yeah. I mean, I'm always astonished at your memory for this. Is it all just in your brain all the time, or does it just come out when you sit down to start writing?
Yeah, my mother always is amazed at how my memory is so good for stupid, like trivial, useless information. But if you send me a shop for a pepper, a loaf of bread and a pint of milk, I'll come back with a pair of trousers and some records. Do you know what I mean? I'll forget everything you sent me for. But I can remember like what I was wearing in 1983 when I went to see something at the cinema, or I can remember who scored a goal in some football match I went to, the score and the time the goal went in. And I can remember so much trivial stuff that just sticks in my head like that. And I don't know why. I've got such a good memory for that.
So let's actually, dear listener, sorry, I'm addressing the listeners for a minute. I asked Marv to pick a bunch of tunes, so we'll get to that in a minute. But first of all, why did you start a fanzine? Is it just because it's something everyone does, or it felt like it at the time?
Yeah, I was I got into music and going to gigs and things in the very, very early 90s, very late 1980s. I was a bit of an indie kid initially, the Manchester bands, like that sort of thing. And then Nirvana and all the grunge things. And then I started digging a bit deeper in the Sex Pistols, the Clash, Public Image Limited, stuff like that. I went to university, and a couple of my friends went to university at the same time in different parts of the country, and we'd write each other letters in those days. And one of my mates, Graham, he went to Bristol, and he got involved in the punk scene in Bristol and was sending me flyers and tapes with bands like Stalingrad and Underclass and Doom and things like that, Voorhees. It was just this whole new world opened up. Like, I thought I was into punk because I like Sham 69, and then I heard Voorhees' first album, and I changed overnight. So that's not punk. This is punk rock now. And I started ordering everything, like records, singles, cassettes, fanzines, and voraciously sort of soaking it all up in sort of early to mid 1990s. And then when I moved to Boston after university in Lincolnshire, there was a bit of a scene that had been really strong and had died out a bit, but was getting back up. And I met people like Urco, Poindexter, Fairsache, all of those bands, and the people who are involved. And musically, I have absolutely no ability whatsoever. I'm not a musician. I can't sing or anything like that. So I thought I'll write a fanzine instead. That'll be my contribution, because the punk idea is like get involved, isn't it? And don't just be someone who pays the money, watches the bands, goes home, buys the records. Although I do that, I wanted to contribute something. And a lot of people would say to me, Boston, I've never heard of it. Where's that? They didn't even know where Lincolnshire was, never mind Boston. So I started sending off demo cassettes of the bands like Urco and Poindexter and so on. And I ended up writing a fanzine initially to be like a glorified advert for our local scene, to get gigs for our bands and get bands to come and play in Boston. And that lasted for 2 or 3 issues. And then really good friend of mine, who's sadly no longer with us, Jas Toomer, who was in Urco, he was a prodigious letter writer and record trader, and he knew everybody everywhere in the world. And on long journeys to gigs to Bradford or Leeds or London on like a Tuesday night and things like that with Urco, we'd swap tales of stupid things we've done in the past, and I just thought, yeah, I could write about that. I could put that into a zine. And by about issue 4, I think I did the first bit where I wrote about messing about at school, getting thrown out of a science lab and the teacher beating some kid up or something like that. And people seemed to like that. And it caught on and it developed, and I became rather infamous as much for the sort of punk rock coverage as the stupid childhood memories and daft stories. And that's where you came in, if you remember, because my mother-in-law would take an issue. I'd get home from work and she'd been to visit, and there'd be £1 on the table. And I'd say to Mrs. Gadgie, I'd say, whose is this £1? She said, oh, Mum left it. She took a zine. And she would read the stories to her mother, my wife's grandmother.
Oh, wow.
And she would skip the record reviews, talking about House Rotten's new 7-inch or a gig that I went to see at the 1 in 12 Club. And she'd just read the stupid stories of falling out of trees and, people shitting on driveways and playing football over the field till it got too dark, all those sort of things. And she loved it. And I thought maybe there's something in that there's maybe an audience for my nonsense outside of punk rock. And about that time, you said to me, have you ever thought of writing a book? And I thought, well, actually, yes, I have. And there we go. That's what led to the book, which was like Gadgie's greatest hits for the first 16 or 17 issues, minus all the punk content and just the sort of biographical content. And I'm eternally grateful for yourself for printing that up for me.
It was a lot of fun to do.
Just carried on from there. Yeah, it just 50 issues later, I'm still talking about daft things that people said on the way to a gig or funny things that happened at work. And I'm still doing it now, and people still buy it and lap it up. So,
well, you appear to have a lot of material. I like the way that some of the stories over the years, if you haven't set the scene at the start of a story, and listener, these are completely like entwined with the zine. It's not like now it's this, now it's that. It's all quite combined. That sometimes I'm pleasantly sort of like amused when I find out the story you're telling is actually much, much more recent. I love the fact that it's not. The thing is, I don't think it would work so well for me. I mean, this is all subjective, and I'm not saying a truth, but if it was like this sort of saccharine rose-tinted spectacles look at the past, I think that there's plenty of that from other places, but it's the way you're quite brutal with some of it, especially the way you talk about yourself. And
I like a bit of self-depreciating humour. I mean, it'd be easy, wouldn't it, to tell your life story where you're the dashing hero who's brilliant at everything. And I could tell you a good football story where I played in a cup final and I was brilliant and we won the cup, and a complete stranger told me I was the best player on the pitch. And I was like, yeah, thank you, mate. I love that. I really appreciate it. But I could also tell you stories where we got lost on the way to a football match, or where there was no window in the changing rooms and there was just this massive hole in the back, and this fella came round and said to us, "Don't worry, lads, I'll lock the door." And
What, lock you in?
yeah, he like locked the door so no one could get in and steal our stuff, but there was like a huge 6-foot window missing in the back that anyone could crawl in. I find that sort of thing far more entertaining than telling you, when I was brilliant and I won the cup, or when I did this, when I did that. I think the more mundane, everyday sort of stories are much funnier and more interesting. I'm quite happy with a bit of self-depreciating humour as well.
It's a type of humour that it runs through the whole punk rock scene. It's a very rich vein. In fact, it's almost a warning sign if a band is prepared to admit they're good, which makes interviewing bands quite challenging sometimes.
Yeah, don't you find you get like press releases and they tell you like it's the best album since the Beatles or something, and automatically, no, I don't even want to listen to it.
Well, I want to speak to you about your reviews, because you don't have a review policy per se. Review policies, for anyone who hasn't read hundreds of zines, some zines have a review policy and they say quite clearly what they will and won't accept.
Yeah.
And I mean, mine, this goes back to, I would get 150, 200 CDs through the letterbox some months. It just got nuts. But mine was, if you use the phrase next best thing, if you use the phrase best kept secret, and I had this whole list of things. If your press release has any of these phrases in it, I will destroy it and never speak of you. Because it just
built a loyal local following. That's another one, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we've built a good following locally and supported some big name bands. I'm like, I don't care. Yeah.
That, they list, you'd read the press release and it would just list the bands they'd played with. And I always think, I don't give a shit. They're those bands. Like, I couldn't even figure out why I didn't care. It wasn't that I thought they were like hanging on the coattails. It was just, that's irrelevant. It'd be like getting sent a tape or a CD and going, do you know what, the day before this was recorded, I had Weetabix for the first time in months. You'd be like, well, if that is something that you want to be a part of your shtick, then at least be fucking funnier about it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Used to get some good piss take press releases. Just the very concept of a press release seems slightly weird now.
Yeah, I think in the DIY punk world nowadays, I get the odd CD with a scrolled note. Now then, Marv, here's our new CD. Hope you like it. Give us a review if you would. I mean, that's enough for me. And then I listen to it and make my own mind up. But a lot of the time you get sent downloads. Here's a link. Give us a shout. Give us a mention on your page or in your zine or whatever. And you get a little bit of a press release. But I think with the DIY labels I generally deal with, you don't get so much of that up their own arse sort of thing.
Because they actually build relationships. I was really sort of wandered away from the world of zines a bit, and your enthusiasm for sending me each copy of Gadgie, which I'm always very grateful for, did keep me connected. But when I started this podcast and started to really dive back into the world of zines and the scene as a whole, because I've not played in a punk band or a band that would kind of necessarily fit in that scene for quite a while, I was really pleased to see some names are still really current, like TNS Records.
Yeah.
It's like well chuffed that they're still going, because they were always absolutely spot on as people. And they would be more likely to make a phone call and tell you about a band rather than, God, this is going back a bit. So it's kind of cool that a lot of that hasn't died out. But your review policy is basically you'll only talk about a release if you like it.
Yeah, I've gone the complete opposite way. I used to review everything I got sent back in the day, as us old people like to say. But I used to have a post office box. I used to go and collect it every Friday. I'd take my daughter to a dance class and we'd call her on the way home, and she'd sit and open the letters and go, oh, there's a CD in this one, Dad. Oh, there's a record in this. There's a zine in this one, some stickers. And a lot of the time it'd be bands that got what we're about, but a lot of the time you'd also get stuff where somebody had obviously picked up Fracture fanzine and gone down and just sent to every address there, even if you only covered D-beat bands like Bullet Belts and Studded Jackets, and you'd get like some singer-songwriter stuff or the latest indie band or something, which you clearly would absolutely hate, have no interest in, or not want to feature in the zine, even if, because it's not the sort of thing I wanted to cover. So I'd often write quite brutal reviews of stuff that I hated. And
did any of the bands ever contact you?
No, I never got started on at a gig. No one like attacked me or, but I think I wrote something like, I think it became quite a challenge to not just say, like shit sandwich sort of review. And I put something like, I'd rather shower in diarrhea than listen to this again, or just stupid, childish, inane, puerile sort of reviews. But then I figured, nowadays I've got 28 or 32 pages, and why waste like 2 pages writing about some band that I've got no interest in at all? So I just band records that I pick up, and if I really like them, I'll write a bit about them. And I get sent lots of stuff, and I'll be honest, if I don't like something, I just don't review it, because like I usually from some labels get 4 or 5 releases maybe, and I'll pick the 3 that I really like and just write about them. Because, like I say, I've not got the time. I don't know about you. I've got thousands of records and I've got thousands of songs digitally, and I want to listen to stuff I like. I don't want to sit and listen to some awful metalcore band or some whiny pop punk band when I've got loads of other good records that I want to listen to.
I realised that, but it was starting to make me hate music.
Yeah,
I started off with the intention of giving everything a fair shot. I just couldn't do it. I ended up just not even wanting to listen to the stuff I did have. I just got so exhausted by it, and it was such a relief when I stopped printing the zine that I didn't have to do that anymore. I never did have to do it. I think kind of your attitude is a much healthier one.
Yeah, because, like Mr. T at Lights Go Out fanzine, Lights Go Out fanzine. He reviews everything he gets sent, and he's into mainly sort of skate punk, that sort of thing. But he's got stuff where he says, "Oh, I don't like this sort of thing, not my cup of tea," or "Oh God, this is awful, I can't stand it." And it's clearly nothing that he's ever going to buy or be interested in. I've chatted with him about it, and he has an open door policy, but he will absolutely like slate something if he can't stand it.
I don't know how Paul has the energy. So Mr. T, I've known him for God knows how long. So we used to tour with him, with Second in Line, my old band Junk Culture. We used to do, well, I'd say tour. We'd do like 3 or 4 dates, playing to no one, and then sleeping on each other's floors, which was a bloody great way to spend your time when you're younger. But his I don't know where he gets his energy from. He's probably going to listen to this. Hello, Paul. But I genuinely don't know where he gets it from. The man, when he started putting out Lights Go Out, he's never let up. He's just been firing them out ever since.
He's been going out monthly for about a good few years now. I write a column for him every month, and sometimes I stockpile them and send him like 4 or 5. I think, right, I can have a rest now. But I try to do something every month for him, and it is a challenge. But he's up to 120, I think, the next one will be.
I wrote a column as well for a long time, and I got to say there was nothing left. It's just like, my brain is now empty. I've emptied it all into a fanzine, but yeah, there we go. So we ought to have some music, really, because you got some music choices. I'm going to play the first one, and I was going to try and put these in chronological order, but if I'm honest, I couldn't be asked. So here's the first one.
Shall we take a trip down memory lane? Head in the clouds into the acid rain. Time means nothing, I can smell the tree. Chase that rainbow in the summer breeze. Stay yellow, stay yellow,
I hate that we can only play 30 seconds for licensing reasons, and it's really
That's
brutal when
made my day, that is.
it just slams it all. I was really surprised by that choice.
Yeah, I can imagine if there's any like punks who know me listening to this, they'll be absolutely mortified. But that's Northside, a sort of, being polite, second division Manchester band from the early 90s. And the reason they have a special place in my heart is it was the first gig I ever went to.
Oh, wow.
In 1990. I was probably about, what would I have been, 16 maybe, going on 17. And me and my brother and all our mates were into like the Stone Roses and the Happy Mondays. And they played Middlesbrough Town Hall. So the first band I ever saw live, I believe, was their support band, who I think were called the Hair and Skin Trading Company or something.
Don't
And I
remember
just stood
that.
there thinking they were awful. And then Northside came on. It was brilliant. We were all... I think my brother had been about 3 or 4 gigs before me. He was into music. And because I spent all my money going to watch football. I was Middlesbrough season ticket holder. But yeah, it was the first gig I went to. And I loved it. And I've been to about 766 since.
Wow. Well, the reason it surprised me is that was absolutely... I think I've got that on I might even have the 12-inch.
Yeah, I've got the 12-inch. And the LP.
I loved it. I was, me and my mates in this little rural village in Suffolk were really into... Stone Roses were just like gods to us, really.
Mm.
And then the Charlatans is why I actually started playing in bands.
Yeah,
But we used to cover that. We used to cover Shall They Take a Trip?
I think it was the first scene that I felt part of. Because when I was younger, I like Adam and the Ants and Bow Wow Wow and The Jam and whatever was on Top of the Pops. But I'm not going to pretend I'm like really cool. And I went to see like The Jam when I was like 9 or something. Yeah. So it was the first time I felt part of something. We're all in our flares and paisley tops and curtains, haircuts, like walking down Linthorpe Road in Middlesbrough, looking like a right bunch of bell ends, but thinking we were really cool. But
look back now, and Northside, they did have a top 10 hit. Take 5.
Take 5 got in the charts. Yeah.
But if you look back at
Rising Star, Shining Star, something like that.
I can't remember, but looking back, they were wicked young. They were. There was them, and then another band called Northern Uproar came along a little while afterwards. They were like even younger, and then bands just seemed to get in. I mean, when I say younger, I was about 15, and they were probably 21. So at the time, we would have thought they were like past it and old. But but I saw years later, I saw a poster for Northside, and they're playing Norwich, I think, and they turned into a reggae band or something. And I don't know if I misremember. Yeah, I don't know if I misremember that, because it was about 10 years later. It was possibly like late 90s by then. And I can remember being really surprised, thinking that was a bit of a curveball, and it might have just been a different band, or I might have just been entirely misremembering. But that would have been a surprise. But I can see the parallel with punk personally, because the Charlatans were... That organ sound is what I fell in love with. And they had what I now understand as being kind of almost a northern soul edge to them. And it was it seemed, I loved it, I absolutely adored it, but it seemed slightly unachievable. And the Stone Roses were just there was no way we were even going to attempt to do anything like that. But Northside, just guitar and a really simple bass line, the drums were like, do you know what, that feels like something we might actually be able to have a crack at. That's where the punk rock of it is to me.
Yeah, it's very much that thing when there's a subculture, there's 2 or 3 bands in a particular area or venue have a particular look and aesthetic and sound, and then within a year there's loads of bands doing it, and you get like the Mock Turtles and Northside like you say, Northern Uproar, and you get loads of bands walking around in cagoules and Adidas Gazelles and until the next thing. And it did feel like we were part of something, because all the music I'd listened to beforehand had already been, whereas this was our time, our music. And for a few years, it was all we listened to. The Charlatans we loved them. I went to see them in Nottingham last year with my brother, and we had a trip down memory lane, and it's like a greatest hits set. It was wonderful. Yeah.
I think they're still current. I think they're one of the very few bands who actually rode the wave
Yeah.
really well. Have you read Tim Burgess's book?
I've not, no, but I do like that they've never stopped.
Is it
And
the
I
books
know
where
they've got real hardcore fans who follow them everywhere through thick and thin and thinner. But
the
they
books?
are still a good band, yeah.
The book's worth a read. I'm not going to go on about it in depth because I covered it in a previous episode, but it's worth a read. I was well shocked to find out Tim Burgess was a crackhead, though. That came as a bit of a surprise.
Right, okay. I don't know.
But that's there's always going to be a bit of sensationalism in books like that. But
you have to sell the book, don't you?
You got to sell the book. But what I like about it, after saying I'm not going to talk about it, I'm going to give you like a very brief kind of bit, is that he actually has a fantastic memory for what it was actually like and how it and how it evolved, which is a lot more interesting than some other books that just go, of course, then we got our Brit Award or whatever.
Yeah. And then we recorded this in France and blah, 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 yeah.
It's a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
Right, so let's move on to the next track.
Okay.
So this, do you want me to, I'm going to say, do you want me to announce them? You know what they are because you sent me the list.
If you wish, just for the listeners.
Okay, I'm going to say the name of the band and afterwards you can tell us the name of the track. It's like slamming a door when it stops like that, isn't it?
Yeah. It's the one and only. It's Discharge, isn't it? The greatest punk band ever. I went to see him on Saturday night for the 11th or 12th time or something. I've seen about 4 or 5 times just this year. I absolutely love Discharge. Their album, their first album, I think, is the greatest punk rock record ever. It never ever ceases to amaze me whenever I listen to it. How intensely brutal it is, absolutely searing. And to think they did that in like the early 80s. These bands now that try and do that and can't sound that savage, it's unreal. And I've been to see them many times recently since they've had the new lineup, but they've been like that for a good 8 or 9 years or something now. And whenever they play anywhere in the East Midlands, I'll be there. I love Discharge; they're great.
I need to revisit that album because I haven't heard them for such a long time. And I think last time, sometimes I think when you hear bands, your tastes haven't quite aligned. They haven't quite sort of caught up with whatever it is. And I listened to Discharge before and kind of went, whoa, 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 whoa. It was like almost too much. But kind of, I've got into loads of terrible Scandinavian metal over the last few years. And hearing something like Discharge just sounds raging. It just sounds brutal's the only way I can think of it. It's brutal in a way.
When I first heard them, I nearly sort of didn't get into them because I'm an idiot and I bought their Y12 inch from a second-hand record shop while I was at university in the early 90s. And I thought, oh, that's that band everybody talks about. I'll have a go on that. And in my naivety, I just assumed it was an LP because it's a 12-inch, isn't it? But it's actually an EP and it played on 45. So I got home and I put it on and I played it at 33 and it just sounded like really awful, slow, dirgy metal. I
probably quite like that, though.
Yeah, and I thought some people would probably like it, but I thought, this is awful. And I thought, such an influential band. I must have got like the wrong band, or I must have got their wrong. It must have been their awful metal phase, which, well, we'll not talk about the second album. But and then I just put it to the back of the cupboard and I didn't listen to it for a few months. And then I think I must have been playing some 7 inches and I'd left it on 45 by mistake. And then I heard the Y12 inch as it was meant to be. I was just, oh my goodness, this is something else. And that was it. It was like life before Discharge and life after Discharge. It's like a pivotal moment in my life, I think.
It reminded me of the, the band Stupids.
I know them well. Yes,
Yeah,
yes. We
Ipswich
had them in
band.
Boston.
The story of how Tommy learnt to play the drums. Have you heard that?
I've not. No.
Well, because at the time, especially when Stoops first came about, they were like, fastest band there was, and also
Yeah,
that was also Wolfie at the time from Real Overdose. He wanted to learn the drums, and I'm going to cringe if he ever listens to this. I do chat to him sometimes, and he just I'll learn the drums by playing along to records. But he played along to AC/DC albums, but by playing them at 45. And I don't know if that was an accident or not, but the idea of just like, how do you play the drums? Right, okay. Like,
Yeah, and there you go. There's the stupid sound. Yeah.
there it is indeed.
Yeah, we had the
Right.
Stupids play Boston. It was quite relatively recently. They didn't play back in the day, but a lot of people were massively into them in Boston before, when I didn't live here. And then when I was putting gigs on, I got offered the Stupids, and loads of older folks came out the woodwork who had not been to gigs for years, and they were shouting all the songs out, requests, and it really made some people's day. And people who hadn't been to a punk gig in like 20 years were coming out to see the Stupids, and they came to our house for dinner beforehand. We fed them, and Tommy was out in the garden throwing the ball for our dog. I said to the missus, that's Tommy Stupid out there throwing the ball for our dog. And she was like, who is it? I was like, my wife's like, it's any sort of punk, sort of celebrities, if you like, just completely pass her by. She's not into it at all. And
I think it's with Tommy and the Stupids, it's the sense of humour that's what kind of appealed to me.
Yeah.
Same thing, plays in Ipswich, and they'll you see people you haven't seen for years. But like I said, he talked to each other sometimes. He sent me a message on Facebook Messenger a couple of years ago. There was the street I live in Ipswich, just typical Victorian terrace. There's always like problems with cars getting hit and stuff. And the local newspaper, I know people at the local newspaper, and they basically said, look, we need someone to like make a statement or say something about parking, something really mundane. And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I'm kind of quite happy with kind of getting me face in the paper, because then I get a message from my mum going, why are you in the paper? I'm like, fucking read it. That's why the words are there, like with the picture. And so they came to take a picture, and I thought nothing of it. I just stood there like doing, I was refusing to do the pointing and looking cross thing that they do in local newspapers. I was just stood there like that, I think, trying to like look like, I don't know, something. And it came out, and I got a message from Tommy. He said, for fuck's sake, man, you can't wear Crocs in the paper. He said, that's just not punk rock. And yeah, I looked at the picture, I was wearing shorts, and because I just popped out my front door, I was just wearing Crocs. He's like, you've let the whole of punk rock down.
That's it. Hand in your punk card now.
Right, let's have another track. I'm not sure there's anyone who wouldn't know what that was, but what was that?
That is Ex-Offender by Blondie.
They sound promising.
Yeah, it's no secret. I think it's fair to say that I'm a bit of a Blondie fan. When people say about the fanzine, so it's the one with Debbie Harry on the cover, and you have to narrow it down a bit, don't you?
You always find new pictures.
Yeah,
I think almost every time I pick up a copy of Gadgie, there's a new picture of Debbie Harry in it, which is
you
worth
can never have too many
admission
pictures of Debbie Harry, can you? It's, I found Blondie years and years and years ago when my dad had a built-in. As remember in the 70s, all the furniture was built in, wasn't it?
Oh, you get like a sideboard with a record player.
Yeah, built-in stereo cabinet that was part of the wall, and there was a tiny little
load-bearing record player.
yeah, and it'd have like little glass doors built in with bricks and things, and around built into the wall. And think if something fell down the back of it, you would never get it back because you
It's
couldn't
gone
move
forever.
it. So there'd probably be like some Star Wars figures or Subbuteo players or postcards or whatever. And when he decided to knock it out and redecorate, we found 2 cassettes down the back, and one of them, they were both recorded by somebody from a dad, and one of them said Blondie Parallel Lines, and one of them said Dead Kennedys, which my dad has got no interest in punk. I have no idea why he would have a Dead Kennedys cassette. So anyway, me and my brother found them and we put them on. And the first one was the Dead Kennedys. And in our youthful naivety, we thought there was something wrong with the cassette because Jello's voice is quite jarring, isn't it? If you're not familiar with
It's also
punk.
quite wobbly in some
Yeah,
ways.
and the strange guitar sound, and it was too much. Like you said earlier, it was too much for us then. But I would come back to discover the Dead Kennedys. So we put the other one on, and it was Parallel Lines, and it was the most incredible thing I'd ever heard in my life. It was like Hanging on the Telephone came on, and this woman's voice and this like the music, I was absolutely like smitten. And all I had was this cassette. I didn't even know what they looked like. And then a few months later, I was in HMV and I found the LP. And then I looked at the picture, and well, that was it.
That's it. Life over.
Yeah, that sent me on a journey, shall we say? And I've been absolutely obsessed with Blondie and Debbie Harry ever since.
I've never got my head around where the sound came from. I've tried to figure it out because they're like aliens. I've got this theory that some bands could well have just landed from outer space. There's no comparison. There's no, not just going, oh, they're bloody great. Just saying, who else sounds like Blondie? Whoever did before, who has since? They're just, it's its own. You go into the record shop, there should be like punk rock, metal, Blondie, jazz. Do you know what I mean? It's like its own genre.
I think that the original punk scene that we, obviously I wasn't there, but I've read everything there is to read and watched every documentary. But you think like Talking Heads, the Ramones, Blondie, Television, Patti Smith, none of them sounded similar to each other. They're all completely different.
Yeah.
And I think Blondie were initially the weaker of all the bands that everybody thought weren't very credible and wouldn't do very well. They were a bit ramshackle live, apparently. And it was sort of 50s monster movie, B movies, 60s like girl groups, sort of new wave, pop, punk. And it was a mashup of everything. And it was very influential. Like nowadays, there's lots of bands that you can say, some A&R man looked at them and thought, oh, we've got the British Blondie here, or we've got the next 5 men in drab suits and skinny ties and a beautiful woman singing. And you can see how influential they've been since. But you're right. There was nothing like them at the time, was there?
So have you read Please Kill Me, the Legs McNeil book?
No, I've not read that one, no.
It's really, really good. It's based on...
should.
It's based on sort of oral history. So he tells the story from just before Velvet Underground to basically just after, well, where Blondie then started to get big. Really, really good. Deborah Harry, anything like that, she just comes across so well. She wasn't, obviously teenage boys are going to look at Deborah Harry and there's an immediate visual appeal, but...
And their dads.
And their dads. But as you get older, like, she's really funny. And she was kind of coarse. She was kind of
she's a cool
rude.
punk woman, isn't she? And she might come across a bit aloof or a bit guarded, and I like that as well. I think there's still a lot about her that we don't necessarily know that she keeps to herself.
Yeah, fine.
But the Face It book, the biography she put out was I read it in like a day. I just sat and read it from cover to cover, and there was things in that I'd never heard. And I thought I knew everything about Blondie. There was things that she still kept back and were in that book that were quite shocking or quite funny. I think that's the first time.
What's it called? I haven't heard that. What's it called?
Face It. It was written by herself.
Cool.
There's been biographies of the band and Debbie Harry before, but not written by her personally.
That's smart. I'm gonna read that.
It's very, very good. Yeah.
Excellent. Right. So the next band, I I hadn't actually heard. I thought it was going to be The Boys or Dead Boys or one of
Oh,
those.
okay, I know what we've got now. Yeah.
So this is Zero Boys. Never heard. I'm just going to make a note. Read that book.
And get
Very
this album
important.
as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, okay. Let's just play it. Zero Boys.
Turn on the radio and all you hear is some Beatles. Don't wanna hear no more about knickknacks or bones. You've seen them live in 60s times and days. By living in the 80s. Living in the 80s. Turn on the radio.
What? God, I was really sideswiped by that. I could see in my mind, we sort of do this weird thing as music freaks where you think you understand somebody else's taste, and then something comes along that sort of it fits, but I wouldn't have expected that. I've not heard Zero Boys. I mean, what are they current? Are they old? What? Tell me about them.
They're early 80s American hardcore band, part of that scene from
Really?
those days where it was like fast, razor sharp punk rock, really hard, but also really melodic, really tuneful, and the vocals are so unbelievably snotty. That's one of their slower numbers. They're in the same, if you like, Circle Jerks and Black Flag and that sort of early adolescence and things like that, early American punk. And that album that's from Vicious Circle is one of my favourite punk albums of all time. It's an incredible record. And I thought I'd never get the chance to see them. And my friend who lives in Amsterdam, can you remember the band Brezhnev?
Oh yeah, God, yeah.
Yeah,
They brought a chainsaw to a gig in
That's
Ipswich.
right. Yeah. Well, the drummer Oob is a very good friend of mine. I kept in touch with him ever since, and we visit each other sort of on and off. And he works at the Melkweg, the music venue in Amsterdam, as security. And every so often he'll send me a message saying, "Do you fancy a weekend in Amsterdam? Look, Suicidal Tendencies are playing or whatever." And I was chatting to him. He said, "Oh, we've got the Zero Boys coming up. Do you fancy coming over?" And I was like, "Oh, yes." So that was it. I booked a flight that day and I was in Amsterdam 2 days later,
Wow.
thinking it was like a rare chance to see the Zero Boys. And they played to a small crowd of about 250. Whereas when I saw Suicidal Tendencies there, it was absolutely rammed. There was like thousands of people there. But they played that whole album and a few other, tracks, and they were absolutely incredible. I was blown away by it, and it cost me an absolute bloody fortune. Booking a flight, when do you want to go? Oh, like on Wednesday, please. And like, oh right. And but I stayed at his house. We went record shopping, had a few beers, and I flew home again with my Zero Boys t-shirt on, thinking that's like a bucket list tick, And then I saw they were playing Nottingham 2 days later. I thought, fuck's sake. So I went to Nottingham with a couple of friends saying, "Oh, Zero Boys are playing." I like this legendary band. And I absolutely love that LP. And they were playing in this pub that doubled up as a burger bar. And somebody went round saying, "Are you stopping for the band?" to these people who are eating their burgers. "Oh, no. So, well, we've got to get everybody out by 7:30 or something." It was not advertised at all. Like how we found out, I think I picked up a flyer in Selector Disc or something like that, and there was about 50 people there, and two indie bands who are absolutely nothing at all to do with punk supported. Nothing against them, they just seemed a bit weird, and I don't think many people knew about it. But they came on stage and they were absolutely brilliant again. With about 50 people, it was like playing in like the bar of some pub, and I thought, this is surreal. I've got one of like the greatest American punk LPs of all time, and they're playing it in front of 50 people in a burger bar in Nottingham. And the next week, I went to another gig, and everyone I spoke to was saying, "What, really? The Zero Boys played in Nottingham?" And they were gutted that they missed it because they just didn't know about it, and they didn't believe me. They thought it must be a different Zero Boys.
This is probably a far longer conversation, but I have some chagrin about the reliance of gig promoters on Facebook, because I'm not. I think probably popped up on Facebook today to speak to you, through Messenger, but I'm not really there. I'm not a part of it, and through work stuff, I know how the algorithm works, and I keep missing out on gigs. I mean, Ipswich is a tiny town. How do I keep missing out? I used to run a website.
Actually, in Ipswich.
Yeah, I used to run a website, God, for about 15 years, called ipswichgigs.co.uk, and the point of that was I'd go through all the listings every week and pick out the punk gigs, or pick out the independent gigs, or anything that wasn't just some fucking shitty covers band somewhere. But I stopped doing it because Facebook came along and just, no one was looking at the website, and I had like 3,000 people on the mailing list at the time, email addresses. I just stopped. And then each time I stop, a few years later, I start realizing I'm missing out on gigs. And at the moment, I keep missing things. So what me and a couple of other promoters are doing is we're insisting on flyering. I mean, it's the most basic thing. We go to a gig and we give people a flyer. And that still appears to be the absolute best way of knowing what's going on. But if you're not going to gigs, we're getting so desperate now as middle-aged men that we've got a WhatsApp group called Gig Goers.
Desperate middle-aged men. It sounds like a new band, doesn't it?
Well, I am in a band like that. But you get to middle age, like your rehearsals aren't like drinking cider. They're sort of, emotional support and parenting challenges get discussed. But yeah, we've got a WhatsApp group, and basically if one of us spots a gig, a lot of stuff happens in Norwich, which is, just up the road from us. And like, wait, have you seen this? Have you seen this is going to happen? Because if you're not going out to gigs twice a week, then you do miss out. But shit,
me and a load of friends in Boston and area have a Facebook group. It's where anybody who spots a gig and is going to go to it posts in there, like, look at this, who fancies a lift, who wants to come, or is anyone driving to this? It's getting harder if you don't use Facebook. But when I went to see Discharge in Stamford on Saturday night, on the way out, there was a man stood there.
You saw them in Stamford?
Yeah, of all places. Yeah.
Wow, okay.
What else is there to do on a Saturday night in Stamford? Go see Discharge.
Stamford near Peterborough?
That's it, yeah.
Stamford on the A1?
Yeah, there's a group called the Scary Clown Posse, and they've been putting gigs on for 10 years, and they wanted a big sort of 10-year anniversary party, so they booked a bigger than usual name, and Discharge played in a venue. It's like a sort of damp medieval cellar beneath a really upmarket sort of posh wine bar, pub, dance music-y place, but downstairs it's this gloomy sort of dungeony place.
That's what you want, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's dark, but they've got a really good proper sound system, lighting system, stage, and what have you. And it's a brilliant venue. But yeah, there was someone giving out flyers on the way out. He was handing them out for a gig in Peterborough in a couple of weeks. That's how it should be.
I mentioned this I'm going off on tact here, and we're slightly running out of time, but I need to go to gigs in Peterborough. I've been going to Peterborough for 30 years. It's where my in-laws live. It's where my wife's from. I know the city really well. Never been to a gig.
Well, Stamford's the place to be. Well, yeah, the Ostrich gigs on there. There's a pub called the Ostrich.
Stamford's where the racking that we had in my record shop came from. It came from a record shop in Stamford. But God, right, we need another tune.
Okay, let's rock.
Down on a brand new day. No more welfare tax to pay. A tight Jerusalem's gonna be flashing a light. Countless millions whisked away. At last we have more room to play. Our systems go and kill the poor tonight. Gotta kill the poor. Kill the poor. Kill.
Oh, it hurts.
Classic.
It hurts to stop that like that, but God, give us your first recollection of. Oh, you did. You told us your first recollection of the Dead Kennedys.
I've touched on the Dead Kennedys, haven't I? But they're just a great band, aren't they? It's all been said, hasn't it? They're one of the greatest like of that wave of American bands. And I like that you can imagine in the 80s calling yourself the Dead Kennedys just for a start off, wearing a Dead Kennedys t-shirt. Like now it's just the name of a band, isn't it? But to Americans of a certain age, you'd get your head kicked in, wouldn't you? And I think initially they started out, I've seen them say that it was a bit of a joke and they were just satire and making fun of everything. But the way they did it, the sort of sarcasm and the it wasn't like the Sex Pistols were just horrible. It was like the Dead Kennedys had a real clever, sort of sarcastic and ironic way, like Kill the Poor and Holiday in Cambodia and outrageous sounding things, but it wasn't literally kill the poor. They weren't saying go and kill poor people, but I think that they were a very, very clever band, as well as the music was just amazing, wasn't it?
There's so much we could say. I can remember I was an indie kid, as we established earlier, and I can remember the Dead Kennedys was the first band I heard. I just started playing in a punk band in Ipswich at the time, and they were the first band I heard that I thought to myself, they can't say that, can they?
Yeah,
I was so shocked, like Chemical Warfare and stuff. I was just
and you dig deeper and realise it is very, very clever political diatribes, but not the war is bad, stop the bomb, not that sort of angry anarcho style. It was something very, very different, which it was one of the first punk bands I really got into when I started discovering like the American bands like the Dead Kennedys and Black Flag and so on. But yeah, there's not much more to say. They're just a great band, and their records are timeless. They still sound amazing now, don't they?
So in this desert island disc type thing we're doing here, let's go for the next song. So there's the horrible side. That song though is, I think that song does shine through that on that first album, the only proper album. Did you ever see the Sex Pistols?
No, I never did. No, it was before my time originally. Obviously, I never bothered with the reunions for one reason or another. But I know people who went to see them. I've seen the TV. There's a on TV. There's a Sky Arts like concert, isn't there? England. There'll always be in England, I think it was called, of them at some big posh venue in London. And yeah, it looks great. It looks brilliant. But no, I never did.
I saw them at Crystal Palace because they did Finsbury Park, and it was, God, this is a long time ago now. They did Finsbury Park, and a bunch of friends went, and I think, like a lot of people into punk, never mind the bollocks. I thought, yeah, it's important. It's. I don't hate it. It's probably not something I'm going to listen to very often because there's a lot of things I like a lot more. But yeah, friends went to the Finsbury Park gig, came back, spoke well of it. So they then announced a few years later they played at Crystal Palace, not the football ground. It's like an athletics track.
Yeah.
And it was a fun day, which I ought to actually write up at some point. We turned up and they're like, well, I used to think I was like the chaos punks, like the punks who were still Mohican and a bit more sort of proper 80s crust. There's a long walk to the athletic stadium and they were just like passed out in ditches and under hedges and stuff. And it's like they hadn't even made it to the arena. But
punk, innit?
Yeah. But they'd the support bands were like, and you will know us by the Trail of the Dead, who I'm sort of all right with, but the Libertines, like I remember the Libertines came on wearing like red, there's like red British Army things, and they made a big show of throwing their jackets into the crowd, and the crowd threw them back. Like, you can fucking keep that. Yeah. And then I thought they were great, actually. I thought they were good. They played exhaustively. They must have played every single song. They even did like Friggin' in the Riggin' and stuff. It was, but John Lydon.
bodies is just utterly reprehensible, isn't it? It
Oh,
is.
it's horrible song,
It's a
and
horrible, horrible song, and I think it's incredible. It's the best song on the album, I think, and it's just so like if you say to somebody at work, "So what are you doing at the weekend?" You say, "Oh, I'm going to a punk gig," and so, "Oh, is it like the Sex Pistols?" That is what they expect it to be. That
oh, to be
is,
like bodies.
yeah, to be like lots of swearing and all spitting at each other. And me and my mate Cookie, he lives in America now. He's a good friend of mine. He moved out there a few years back, and we used to go to gigs in his car. And he didn't have a stereo, but in the back he had one of those old hi-fis that you'd have in your bedroom. And you could put like 6 CDs, and you could like shuffle. It was like an early version of like iTunes Shuffle, and he'd have Never Mind the Bollocks and a few other like Sepultura or something, and he'd just put it on shuffle. And we'd all once we were driving, you couldn't do anything because it was in the boot. You couldn't like change the song or anything. And whenever Bodies came on, we would effervesce about how we try to think how many words, who could come up with the right word to describe just how unpleasant it was. And I think reprehensible was the best word.
That's the winner, I think. It was actually that song I said about friends coming back and saying good things about Finsbury Park. There was many reissues at the time, and one of the Sex Pistols reissues, there was a version of Bodies. I was going to say a B-side, but it was like track 4 on a CD. But they called it Buddies, and it was a recording from Finsbury Park where you hear it kick in, and then you don't hear the band. You can only hear the crowd singing along, and
Yeah.
it was the same thing at Crystal Palace. It was a great thing to be a part of, but. In the early internet days, John Lydon had an internet radio talk show, and a friend of mine, or someone I know, I should say, that's a bit telling, isn't it? Someone I know got hold of John Lydon's home phone number a few years previously and rang him up. Well, tried to ring him up, didn't think about the time distance, went to a phone box, rang, and his wife picked up, and she was like, "Hello, who is this?" And she was like, "Oh," he was like, "Can I speak to John?" He's like, "He's asleep at the moment. It's like 3 a.m." Like, do you want me to go and wake him up? He's like, No, don't worry about it. So he rang into this talk radio show. It was on a site called eYarda, and apologised. And John Lydon was there. That was you, was it? That was fucking you. Took it with good grace, but the point was he went into great depth about why he wrote Bodies, which is a tale for another time.
Yeah, it's horrible, isn't it?
It is, yeah, awful.
But wonderful. It's a wonderful song. It is everything I want punk rock to be. Snarling and nasty and unpleasant.
Right, so let's have some more of that. Actually, it's not snarling and unpleasant, this, is it?
Still great though. What a song. The reason I picked this one is it is a fantastic song. It's one of my favourite Clash songs, but I've got a really good memory of it. A load of us went to London going back 7 or 8 years ago from Boston, and I think there were about 10 of us went in the end to see Tragedy, the big overlords of crust punk from America, and it was a very exciting day because they were playing 2 gigs in London. They were playing at a whiskey bar near King's Cross or something upstairs, and then they were playing at a squat in the evening. And we all got the train down, and we're all sat in different seats. So we went to the bar and said, "Can we just all stand here because we're all friends and we want to like travel together?" And the woman at the bar said, "You can, so long as you buy drinks." So bear in mind, it was like 9:45 in the morning or something. So by the time we got to London, we were just this sprawling mess of drunken idiots, like spilling out of King's Cross. And we went to the venue, and it was one of those big event days, where a band just plays one gig and everybody descends on London or Bradford or Manchester, wherever it is. And we got absolutely smashed and disgraced ourselves, like we were idiots. And on the train home, there was only about 4 of us on the last leg. where I went from Grantham to Boston, and we got on like falling over and laughing. And there was this other gang, a bit like us, but these 4 middle-aged women, and they'd been to see Take That or something at Sunderland, or they'd been like us, they'd been to see one of their favourite bands, and they started singing Take That songs. So my mate Luke started singing that song by The Clash, and we're all sat there, drunk as skunks on this train from Grantham to Boston, singing Train in Vain by The Clash, and these women were singing Back for Good or something by Take That.
Did he choose to sing it on the train because the title's got the word train in it?
It's possible. I believe it's his favourite song ever. And we all knew it, and it's a great song. And then we got talking to these women, and these like 4 drunken punks from Boston were talking to these 4 middle-aged women from wherever, comparing notes, and we all got on like a house on fire. You wouldn't have thought it, and that song always reminds me of that day. And it is a fantastic song too, isn't it?
It's the one that changed my mind about the Clash. Being a contrary indie kid, I never really got the Clash. I still haven't listened to an album the whole way through, which I do need to remedy.
Heavens above!
I know. Again, first of all, it's the Crocs, and then it's that. But that and
You think you know somebody, eh?
that and Safe European Home are the two Clash tracks I heard. I just went, they almost transcend the genre. It's so good, and the beginning of that so basic, the little dung ding dung ding dung dung ding. Oh, fantastic! But we need to move on to the last track, which was another surprise.
Blended sunrise, and it's a dying world, humming Rheingold. We scavenge up our roads, all my violence, raging tears upon the sheets. I'm resentful for where strangers were.
So again, Bowie, no argument there. But is that from the Buddha of Suburbia soundtrack?
Close. It's from the Outside album, similar era. That's my favourite David Bowie song, and I'm a huge Bowie fan. I've been a massive fan since I was about 13, 14. My auntie gave me some records and forced me to go home and listen to them because she is like obsessed with him, like in love with him. She's got pictures all around the house, a house like a shrine to Bowie. And me and my brother, again, we were like, he was a metalhead, I was into indie and punk stuff, and we didn't know much about David Bowie beyond like he's dancing in the street and stuff like that. And she had a David Bowie CD on or something. I went to her house, and my brother and me said something like, "Isn't that him who did the Laughing Gnome?" And she went absolutely fucking mental.
That's a wind-up thing to say. He must have known.
That's all we knew at the time, because one of my mates had a Laughing Gnome 7-inch single, and we listened to it, and like you'd listen to like Bob the Builder or Shut Up Your Face or something like that. We just thought it was some daft novelty song.
It was,
which it was, I suppose. Yeah. And she went absolutely mental, and she went to her record cabinet and she pulled out Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane, and a couple of other Bowie records, and put them in my hands and said, "Go home and listen to them now." And when we got home, I thought I didn't know much about David Bowie, like I say, and I put on Ziggy Stardust. And when I got home, I went up to my bedroom, I thought, right, let's have a listen. And the minute it started playing, I was just like when I first heard Discharge, it was like before I heard David Bowie and after I heard David Bowie, and I just bought up every single thing by David Bowie I could find. And but it was always like stuff from before my time. But then in the 90s, he released quite a weird concept album called Outside, which was something like there was a murder. It was like a film noir type thing. And the serial killer was arranging the bodies in art sort of installations. And there was these little segues between the songs of this detective in, Bowie's sort of like Cockney geezer sort of film noir-esque sort of things, and it was quite a dark sort of gothic cyberpunk influences in there, and it's a brilliant record. But that song's on it, and it seems totally out of place because it's just like a classic, great big pop song, and it's absolutely wonderful. And that was the record I bought and thought, right, David Bowie's mine now. This is my David Bowie era. Do you know what I mean? And I went to see him. I went to see him at Wembley. Fortunately, I missed Morrissey, the support act. Got there about 10 minutes before the great man came on stage. And he came on stage and he just played like deep cuts from like the Lodger album, from Scary Monsters album. He played Andy Warhol, and he didn't do any hits at all. But he played like Teenage Wildlife, Look Back in Anger, like I said, Andy Warhol. And he played this song, and I was like welling up when he played this song. It's been my favourite song ever since. And me and my girlfriend at the time, afterwards, we were stuck in London. We missed the last train home. So we went to a nightclub in Islington, and we met this skinhead fella because I had a UK sub shirt on or something like that. And he let us stop at his house. And then the next day, we just slept on a settee. The things you do when you're young.
Amazing.
And we just went to this fella's house, and he put us up, made us a cup of coffee in the morning, and he says, I'm off to the football now. He's spotted Millwall, and he was hoping there was going to be some bother. He said, yeah, there might be some bother because we're playing whoever. And then we got the train back to our Chichester, our town, city where we lived at the time. But that was the only time I ever saw David Bowie. And so at the end, he did Moon Age Daydream. I thought, he's going to do the hits now. And he didn't. He just left. And there was no encore. He didn't do that false thing, where they go off and everybody goes, more. And all right then, let's do another set of 4 or 5. He didn't. He just played his full set and then he went. And I just thought, it is amazing that somebody that size playing like Wembley Arena, not just like some little venue, he was playing a great big arena show and he just played whatever he wanted. And he thought, I'm not going to do Ziggy Stardust. I'm not going to do Let's Dance. I'm not going to, he just played whatever made him happy, and it was incredible. And I wish I'd seen him more, but I'm glad I saw him the once. And that song takes me back to that time. Happy days.
Excellent. That's we neatly brought everything around in a circle. So we were talking earlier about how Gadgie is about the celebration of memory to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And storytelling. What better track to end on than one of the master storytellers in music, Mr. David Bowie?
Indeed.
Excellent. Right. We have run over massively, but so what?
It was fun.
It was fun. My friend Billy Porter has been trying to ring me while we've been talking, and he's asked for a shout out. And no, Billy, you can't have one. So we ought to wrap it up there. We don't really have sort of a structured end to kind of these recordings. So I just want to say, well, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure having a conversation with you. I've been to your house briefly to drop off the books, and we've been emailing and writing to each other for many years. Never actually had a proper conversation, never been at a gig together. So thoroughly enjoyed that.
One day in Ipswich, I'll come over and got the Steamboat Tavern or wherever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that, yeah.
God, well remembered. Yeah, the Steamboat Tavern.
Yeah.
Well,
See,
maybe for the
useless information. Tell you a venue in every town.
Oh God, no! I could carry on talking for ages, but I need a piss, and I've got other stuff to do. Frankly, not that.
Okay, it's an Empire Strikes Back ending then.
Right. I'm going to say goodbye. Do you want to say goodbye?
Right. Yep. Thanks for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and up the punks.